So in this video, I'll be talking about principles and parameters, which is one aspect of Noam Chomsky's universal grammar. So principles and parameters is a theory of language acquisition. And in previous videos, we've looked at the difference between language learning and language acquisition. Now, this is part of generative linguistics. Now, a principle is an abstract rule of grammar, or more technically, an abstract rule of universal grammar in the Chomskyan sense of the word. And parameter is like a marker or a switch. Okay, so what does that mean? So, for example, Chomsky would say that a principle is a language universal, that languages have adjectives. Now, what do we mean by a language universal? It means all languages around the world have this aspect, have this feature. For example, it would be very strange to find a language which had no adjectives at all. So when we are born, our innate knowledge of language tells us that languages have adjectives. But where do we place those adjectives? Think about this. We say a red car and un coche rojo. So in this case, this would be what we call a pre-nominal antes del noun, noun. And in the Spanish case, we have un coche rojo, yeah, which is placing it after. So that's where the switch is set. So the switch, we are born with the switch. We are born with the principle that languages have adjectives. If we put the switch up here, then it's flipped on this side for languages which are pre-nominal, like English, or if the child learns Spanish, then the child will flick the switch this way, which is post-nominal. So here we have nature and nurture working together. So nature gives you the switch, and nurture determines if the switch is here or here. Okay, so as it says here, the switch is innate. The setting of the switch, whether it's pre-nominal or post-nominal, comes from the environment. And that's something that I've observed with my daughters. My daughters have a Mexican mother and me as their father, obviously. And sometimes they get confused. They will say something like the car red because they were thinking in Spanish. And sometimes they'll say it wrong in Spanish. They'll say things like el rojo coche. Okay, so in this case, this theory of language acquisition takes into account nature and nurture. Okay, let's have a look at one more example. So is your language pro-drop or non-pro-drop? What does that mean? Well, if we say nosotros comemos pescado, could we drop the pronoun? Could we just say comemos pescado? And the answer is yes. Yeah, you could just say comemos pescado. Because you know from comemos that it means nosotros. It couldn't mean ellos. It couldn't mean yo. It couldn't mean tú. When you say comemos, it means nosotros. Okay. However, let's think about English. If we just said eat fish, we can't just say eat fish to mean we eat fish. Yeah. So in that case, what we can find is that Spanish is a pro-drop language because it allows for the pronoun to be dropped. And English is a non-pro-drop language because it doesn't allow for the pronoun to be dropped. Okay, so let's talk about some switches then. So let's say what we are born with, what's innate is the switch of a language will have pronouns. Okay, so that's probably a language universal. I don't know of any language which doesn't have any pronouns at all. So then the question is, okay, so we have pronouns. That's a language universal. It's an aspect of universal grammar. Okay. But are those pronouns able to be dropped or not? And well, that will depend on the language of your environment. So if you're learning Spanish, you will learn that yes, pronouns can be dropped. But if you're acquiring English as a child, you will learn from your environment that pronouns cannot be dropped. Okay, some exceptions. Think about these two in English, Attorney General and Notary Public. In these cases, we have what we call a post-nominal adjective. Here's the adjective, here's the adjective, here's the noun, here's the noun. But these are very kind of few and far between. This is not very common. And then when we think about Spanish, it's not the case that all adjectives always go after. Think about mi nuevo coche nuevo. Mi antigua casa, mi casa antigua. Yeah. So again, I mean, it's not the case that it's always the case that every single adjective goes after the noun in Spanish. We can see from these two cases that it's not true. But I'm sure you'd agree that in, you know, more than 90% of cases, adjectives in Spanish are post-nominal, and in English, 90% of adjectives are probably pre-nominal. Okay, if not more. Okay, what about this one then? Can English be pro-drop? What did you do after that? Went home. And in that case, we were able to drop the pronoun because it was kind of obvious that it should be I went home. And sometimes we must include the pronoun in Spanish. For example, comen siempre lo mismo. Ellos o ustedes, right? So, or for example, nosotros hablamos ayer, not aire, I'm sorry. I think I'm going to blame the computer for this. Ayer, so nosotros hablamos ayer or nosotros hablamos siempre. So that's a case where it can be either present or it can be past, okay? And that in the world of morphology is called syncretism, okay? So in cases of syncretism, it's best not to avoid dropping the pronoun. So in this case, comen siempre lo mismo. That could refer to ellos or it could refer to ustedes because of this syncretism of comen. So in that case, we could say that English can sometimes be pro-drop, but 99% of the time it's not pro-drop. And there are some cases where it's best not to be non-pro-drop. It's best to be non-pro-drop in Spanish, just to be clear. But again, this is not the way English normally works, and this is not the way Spanish normally works. So I hope this information was useful, guys.